This week's episode is sponsored by Electric Collab, a psychology-based branding and web design studio that positions founders to win more premium clients with a brand they're wildly proud of. If you want to serve a premium audience, you need brand messaging, design, and a digital presence that reflects the elevated quality of your work. Spoiler alert, Electric Collab is my brand studio. So if a rebrand has been in your mind, I would love to meet you. Learn more by visiting electriccollab.com. Now on to the episode. Welcome to Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman. I'm Emily Paulsen, and October is my favorite month of the year. The air feels crisper, the nights grow longer, and there's a certain magic in this season that makes anything feel possible. This month, our conversations take on that same spooky energy. We're going to play with mystery, celebrate the unusual, and find meaning in the things that spark our imagination. If one episode a week isn't enough for you, you will find a special Halloween bonus waiting on Substack. For now, let's dive into this season and see where our curiosity takes us. Have you heard of the anti-hood archetype? I had not, but when I saw today's guest talking about it on her Instagram, I was really intrigued to learn more. Fiona Hillery is an astrologer, tarot reader, Feng Shui alchemist, and the founder of Esoteric Empowerment. She's worked with everyone from celebrities to Fortune 500 leaders, guiding people to use these ancient tools not as fortune-telling tricks, but as frameworks for self-awareness, empowerment, and decision-making. Fiona's own path started in the corporate world until a dark night of the soul led her to the practices she now shares with thousands of clients. Today, she's here to show us how to tap into the wisdom that already lives inside us. Welcome, Fiona.
So thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I am thrilled to have you, and I love your bio. I want to start with Dark Night of the Soul. This year, we're recording this in the fall of 2025, and I feel like I spent all of January and February telling people I was in a dark night of the soul. I was on the dark side of the moon. I just felt like I was in this weird transitional place. So can you start by sharing what brought you to this maybe career change or really just to deepen the practices that you now share with so many people?
Absolutely. I went through what an astrologer nerd would call the Pluto initiation pretty early. Pluto is a planet that, when it hits one of your personal natal placements, really causes you to shed anything that's not in alignment with your soul truth. So for some people, it might happen at 70. Some people it might happen at 50. For me, it happened at 25. And how that looked like was I had built this life that really emulated a lot of my aspirations from watching Sex and the City throughout my teen years. I picked a career in media, moved from small town Rhode Island to New York City, bootstrapped my way from $500 in a dream when I first landed at 22 to a career that was respectable, that looked really good on paper. And so externally, things were looking up for me. But at 26, I started to notice these patterns that would repeat in my personal relationships, specifically romantic. But there was this ongoing theme of looking for validation outside myself, and some traumas that had been buried deep inside me that were starting to make their way to the surface in these unhealthy, toxic dynamics that were really disempowering. And so I got to the point of which my therapist would call spiritual bankruptcy, where my outer world looked fine on paper, but my inner world was really suffering. And I just remember this come to Jesus moment that brought me to therapy. And coincidentally, my therapist was an astrologer tarot reader. And I'd grown up, my mom's Irish and off the boat, and we had had all kinds of esoteric modalities that were familiar around the home. We didn't go to school or anything like some of the young kids now have, which is really cool, young witch school. I've had many past lives as a person who offers these modalities. And so there was just a soul knowing that, in tandem with the psychological framework of unpacking these traumas and patterns, that I needed something more soul fulfilling. So I worked with this practitioner and also found mentors to teach me how to weave archetypical healing in astrology and tarot to really look at my life from this bird's eye perspective. And in the specific way it was presenting itself with a toxic relationship, it just broke down the semantics and allowed me to objectively see myself and care for myself and tend to myself from these frameworks of esoteric healing. I dove into that with gusto. I was really excited because things started to make sense, right? You're like, oh, okay, yeah. When I look back at this initiation and what I'm seeing from an astrology standpoint, that makes a lot of sense with what I experienced. And instead of looking at it from a predictive lens, which you can, it was more for unpacking these stories that lived within me, looking at the shadow of them and looking how to transmute that shadow into empowerment. And it didn't happen overnight. Working with these mentors, I was able to spend 2 years in this dark night of the soul. And once you rip off the band-aid of healing, things start to bleed before they get better. But I do think that having both these intuitive practices and these psychological practices, and then later in my journey, some of the somatic practices for healing was a game changer and really became a passion of mine and something that I dedicated myself to learning. And through that learning, organically found people who wanted to learn from me and eventually got pushed out of the closet 5 years after that initial dark night. But it was spiritual bankruptcy that brought me on my knees and back to these practices.
You're using so many amazing words and phrases that I don't even know if I fully understand. So I'm going to ask you questions about them. I'm so new to this world. And I love that you shared your mother was into some maybe witchy practices or esoteric practices. I grew up in a Christian household. I'm still a Christian woman. So we were really taught that a horoscope was evil, bad juju. It was some fortune telling bad thing. And I like what you just said that it's not necessarily always predictive. It's more about looking back. And as I've brought in my own worldview, I'm like, wait, God created the stars and the planet. Why was this all marked as such bad stuff to even look at and understand? So I'm trying to understand just even what it is now. Like you said, esoteric healing. What is that?
Yeah, it's looking at these practices from a soul growth perspective. So, whether that's astrology that maps your exact birth time, date, locations, soul blueprint in the form of where the planets were placed within the signs and what that storytelling means that has been practiced for millennia, or whether it's tarot, which also deals with archetypes in the form of figures and numerology and deities that you can embody, you can leverage these tools to understand the framework of your journey on a soul level. I think there's a psychology of understanding the ego versus the inner world versus who you're becoming. And all of those can live with the frameworks of astrology, tarot, and any other spiritual modality on the table. When I say esoteric, I'm not just looking at Fiona, the 3D being here in a meat suit. I'm looking at the evolution of what my soul came here to do. And it can be controversial because it does feed in a little bit to this concept of reincarnation and moving through lifetimes of karma that one can see in a birth chart. So that's where I've taken my practice. But even if you're not going all the way there, looking at lifetimes and lifetimes of evolution and growing in your development, you can still use astrology to unpack some of the current dynamics that you might be facing in your life, in this life.
And I think so many people are drawn to this. Thank you for that explanation. That's helpful to me and maybe others listening who are new to this. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are tracking 100%, but I know some of us are newer. And I feel like there's a influx of people who are interested in these modalities now. And what you just said about soul's purpose or soul's fulfillment, I feel like there's this deep craving of more fulfillment. And so many of us, at least speaking for women, maybe it's the same for men, we did go out and want that Sex in the City life or insert your favorite show or your favorite icon of your teenage years. It felt like let's check these boxes and then happiness will follow. That's what I learned by watching TV and reading about these characters. And then some of us went out and did that and felt like, oh no, I feel terrible. I feel lost. I'm not connected to this. I'm unhappy. Now what? And that's the hardest thing of all, when what you expected just did not come to fruition in the way you thought it would. And fulfillment is so important in all the conversations we have here. Women come here, we're trying to find fulfillment on our terms and break free of some of these societal tropes that we thought would be for us or they're not for us. So, from your perspective, is that what you see people seeking when they come to you or when they step into these types of modalities?
Yeah, that's the way I've set up my practice. Going back to this idea of horoscopes, I think there has been an influx of education around what astrology really is, which is so bio individual to the human and exactly the second that they incarnated, versus where we might have grown up and seen our weekly, monthly horoscopes. And you're like, I don't really resonate with the person who was born 15 days after me, but we share the same sign. So, a really positive societal trend has been that in 2020 during COVID, more people started doing that deep spiritual seeking and understanding that this modality isn't just a party trick. Same with tarot. So a lot of my clients come to deconstruct the ego that they built through the framework that I followed, which was looking aspirationally at what seemed like a good idea to build my life around. And instead of chasing that thing, which leads to that Finding Nemo moment that you're talking about, when they break out of the aquarium and they get to the ocean, they're like, now what? I had that. I experienced that. And that's a spiritual bankruptcy, because you realize that it's not what it chalked up to be. And you really want something more meaningful on a soul level. And working with these modalities will give you a blueprint to knowing your soul's gifts, to knowing what challenges you might be facing in this life, which oftentimes lead to the gift. Some of the time, your dharma isn't so clear. Some people are born knowing that they're meant to be a musician, and other people have to do that breakdown to breakthrough path. So, working with astrology, you can get a sense of your inherent gifts, your challenges, the timing around activating these gifts and challenges, and pivotal growth moments when you're meant to lean into more of a reputation era versus when you're meant to be cultivating more skill sets versus when you're meant to be going more insular. So I like to tell my clients that the chart isn't going to solve something for you. It's going to meet you where you're at. So it's not going to bypass the work for you. There's still going to be work in digging deep and living in alignment, but it'll give you a roadmap to get there.
What role does self awareness play in all of this? Because I'm listening to you, and there are definitely things that I feel right now, today, on this day that we're recording, where I don't really know what to do next in this facet of my business or this piece of my life. I have all these goals for this podcast, and we have a plan, we have a roadmap, but then I question it. Should I change the order of these things? Should I try to go bigger here? Or is this a season where I should just be honing my skills? Things get so confusing so quickly. And how do we know? Is this like a intuitive download that I should be pivoting? Or is this just the challenge that I need to face, but I am on the right path? How do you help people navigate that?
Well, I think that's where astrology does come in handy. So, if you're looking at what the planets are doing now mapped back to your unique birth chart, you can at least answer some of those questions. Like, I am in a season of hard Saturn work where it's going to pay off with diligence and commitment. Or I'm in a Uranus season where I got to shake things up and deconstruct to reconstruct. There is this framework that you're given through understanding which planets are involved in your current pattern in being able to work with that energy. And within that holistic cycle view, you can also ask for guidance from tarot. I often do these decision spreads of what does the timeline look like if I lean in really hard to this path or if I choose path two. Ultimately, these are just tools to get you more in tune with your own inner guidance, because all of that wisdom lives within you. But it is helpful to have tools to lean on if we're feeling dysregulated or not as in touch with some of our own wisdom if we're just running like many of us do in a busy schedule, tapping into tools like astrology and tarot can be really helpful in giving you a sense of direction. And then it's up to you to do the work.
I just find all of this so interesting, honestly. I think your work is so fascinating because if we were having a conversation about this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I feel like there just wasn't enough allowance for the uncertainty that most of us feel most of the time. We're supposed to present like, I know what to do, I know myself, I'm taking strategic steps. I feel like that made us look smart, professional, just the type of woman you wanted to be. And now I feel like there is a little bit more room in society to just admit, I don't know what I'm on this planet to do, or I have this big heart for this type of community, or I want to make change over here, but I don't know if I'm right for that. And I don't know what to do. Just so much more uncertainty that we used to recognize. And it's really refreshing, right? I feel like we're letting the veil slip a little bit, at least in certain spaces, maybe not super publicly out on the internet yet in mass, but I don't know. There's a little bit more rawness and realness coming forward. And I think it's happening because people are like, I'm not going to be able to accomplish what I really want to accomplish if I don't just admit that I need help and seeing it clearly.
And it's a sign of the times, right? Our world is moving so rapidly with technology, and there's a lot of change happening. So, because of that uncertainty in the collective, it ignites that feeling within us. And people deal with uncertainty in different ways. There's an oscillation of uncertainty where it can really trigger fear and inadequacy and imposter syndrome, or it can trigger excitement around the possibilities. I think that's really dependent on whether you're approaching your life as a limitless creator versus someone who might be looking for external validation or a path forward from someone else who's done it for you. So I work with a lot of clients who feel this way. And I never scapegoat the planets, but let's say you're a mutable sign for the past couple of years, like a Gemini, Sagittarius, or Virgo, or Pisces. You've been working with Neptune. So, yeah, you were meant to be in the fog. You were meant to be in this unknown. So, there are certain times in your life where you're going to be initiated into that. And I think that's where self awareness, self confidence, trust in your inner guidance, and strength of your intuition. That's what no one teaches you in school, but that's the skill set that's going to help you through that foggy period. And so many of us are going through a foggy period, and it's okay.
Thanks for saying it's okay. And you're right. The world at large can feel a little foggy. And I'm sure that does pull those feelings to the surface for us as individuals. Let's talk about community and connectedness. So I mentioned this antihood archetype. So we were connected through a mutual friend, Shelly Carlson, who was on this podcast. I know many of you love her episode on personal style, but I know that she was triggered to make that connection because you did this beautiful post and you've done this share on the Auntiehood archetype, and that really caught my attention. So can you share more about what that is?
Sure. I guess I'll preface that I have received a lot of backlash from certain individuals over the past 2 years just because of my age hitting that mid-30 mark. And I've been really clear with myself for maybe a decade that I don't want children. It's this deep inner knowing. I can't explain why. I've done a lot of sitting with this and meditating on it and making sure that ego is not in the way here. And just feel like in this lifetime, I'm not meant to birth my own children. And I'm at peace with that. I feel very good about it. But over the past couple of years, and this didn't come from my family. So I want to say my family's been very supportive, but certain people, especially women of an older age, have felt very entitled to project their opinions on me when they hear that I don't want children. And I'm still on a journey of not people pleasing and not caring what other people think. So sometimes it can be triggering. And this post that I wrote and I felt come through me as a channel is actually the point in my journey with being child free where I felt empowered. And it happened this summer. Last year, I became an actual aunt. The first time my brother and my sister in law had a baby. And I am in love with this child. I'm obsessed with him. And we bond. I imprinted on him. I'm your cool aunt in California who reads tarot. You're going to know me. You're going to visit me on the West Coast when you get older. It was a real joyous moment. And this summer, a lot of my friends have had children, and some of them are older. And this summer, I went on a trip with one of my dear friends and collaborators who has an 8-year-old daughter. And we got to spend super quality time in Brazil, and probably the longest period of time I'd spent with a child. And she really was drawn to me. And I got to witness myself through her eyes as this cool auntie archetype. And it's different than the mom. And I have nothing but respect for moms. But as I've grown to understand and speak with other aunties, the auntie archetype is there to help the mamas where they can't do it all in a day. They're business owners. They might be single. They might be feeding and dressing, all the things that go into being a mother. Auntie can come in as a helping hand, get to do all the fun things, play with the child, and get to also help in terms of a logistical support. And sometimes can be that cool, non familiar face that you can turn to for advice. In certain cases, that might come in the form of wanting to ask about boyfriends or just a different perspective on women. And I was very lucky to have a few aunts on my maternal side that never had children, but were very much that second support system of femininity and lived lives of passion and creativity and adventure. And it's that framework for me that I saw I was able to embody on this trip. So it was a real aha moment where I found my place within the tribe, where I didn't feel shameful for not wanting to have a child. I saw myself as being a support system and different kind of feminine energy for a young child to look up to and to see the possibilities from. It was really self-validating, and I was able to then channel this in writing where I shared my experience of finding that clarity and that fulfillment as an auntie, and now being excited to offer that to the world for all my friends' children. And as my brothers have more children, that will come in a very literal form as well.
It's so cool to hear you lay this out. And it just reminds me of all of the nuance that exists within child free women, just like it exists within women who decide to be mothers. We don't all decide to be child free for the same reasons. We don't all have the same lived experience. And I think this nuance is really important for us to explore and to share. And I'm so happy that you did. I have met with other women. I've never heard this phrasing the way you're doing it. And I think it really puts a nice structure to the emotions that you just described experiencing when you were with these children and how that felt for you. And I know other child-free women who have experienced this as well. The word imprint, right? It's like a sibling has a baby and we are best friends forever. And you feel that we are bonded for life in this relationship as aunt and niece and nephew, even if it's not blood relation, right? We can have those experiences with close friends, kids, and all of that. And I just think it's so important to talk about all the different roles that we can play in the villages that will always exist around us. We don't have to be a traditional mother. We can be an aunt and have the experience you just described. We can also have neither of those experiences. I also talk to child-free women who feel like they just don't connect with children. Not that they don't like them, not that they are against them, but they're not looking for that imprint type of bond. And I just think expressing all the different ways this comes to life for us as individuals, but also, like you said, the role that plays in the larger tribe. I think this is so cool.
Yeah, I felt that too. I mean, I just think about going back to the village and how there were multiple adults raising children. And I would never want to preface the auntie as being of equal stance to the mother. I mean, that's the different kind of intimate relationship. But something ignited in me when I held my nephew and even when I'm with my friends' children, where I feel a sense of responsibility for the future youth. And that's just my experience. I like children, and that's a real misconception. People think that child free women don't like children. I actually love children. And that's why, because it wasn't a fuck yes, in my body to having my own. I actually have a lot of respect for children. I wasn't going to bring one into this world without being a full yes. And yet, this imprinting and responsibility and joy that I find with spending quality time with children close to me in my life is this new path forward where I can still have a space in the community, in the tribe, without sacrificing this truth that has been known to me that I do want to be child free. So I do leave the table open. If something drastic happens and I change my mind, I reserve the right to adopt or foster. But for now, this feels like my path. And this is where Auntie Fee lives, and she's happy here.
You know that every kid in your life is going to think you're the coolest aunt in the world. You are, you have all the cool factor boxes checked. So I can only imagine not just the fun, but the wisdom that you're going to impart on all the kids in your life.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my older friends, her child came to me and wanted a reading. And that was one of the coolest bonding moments because her child was a little bit too cool for school when we spent quality time. We didn't bond as much in that moment. She was going through her teenage years, but now we've built a rapport. And so she reached out to me having graduated college. And yeah, we did a reading and she's speaking the lingo. And now we have that bonding moment together. So I think it's really important that we're able to destigmatize the conversation because unfortunately, I still received a lot of projected opinions, especially in the current culture. There's still some shame around being able to claim this path. So I just feel like it's reframe into more of a positive spin on it than the archetype of spinster. That is the only one that's I've seen portrayed in media. I think this is archetype that you might start to see more in TV and film. I hope so anyway.
I hope so too. One of my close friends bought a condo a couple years ago, and on the paperwork, she had to check the box spinster. Legitimately, that's what it said. Your only options are married woman, divorced woman, widowed woman, or spinster. Wild. It's wild. It's so insane. And I'm glad you brought up media and TV and movies because I do feel like that's a space. I talk about representation and wanting to meet and share all of the beautiful child-free women like you that come into my life because we're not always represented widely in society or our personal circles and character and storylines and celebrities and influencers and all of that stuff. So I hope that there's more of this too. And I don't want to spend time in the negative, but I do think it's important for us to always be in touch with what is happening realistically in the culture. What was controversial about this in people's minds when you put it out there?
Well, it's funny because I don't think the people who had a reaction to my article actually read my article. I think they looked at the social headline and just went for it. If they read it, then they would have read how much I actually adore children, where the initial reaction was, oh, you don't like children, or oh, did we scare you off from having children? And I just followed up and sent them the link. And I think a lot of fear or resentment that some women who are of an older age who might have felt pressured into having children, that can trickle down because I get comments like, "Aren't you afraid you're gonna die alone?" Which is really the ultimate fear of humans. That's a big fear, but ultimately we all die alone in some capacity. I try not to take things too personally. And even though I did receive some backlash around the article, I understood and tried to deepen my understanding of where these people were coming from. And most of the time it was from resentment or fear or just not actually hearing me and doing reading to understand what my lived experience is. And I think the more that we can have conversations that are heart led around this subject matter, the more that we can get into that tribe mentality where there's room for everybody at the table and it's not an either or. And it does look different from how older generations have done it. And so with that might come resistance of, well, you're not doing your part. You need to procreate. But I think having an open mind and an open heart and meeting someone in a conversation that can be uncomfortable, but also can be important will just lead to better synergy across the board within this thing that we call life.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's beautifully handled. And I don't know if I would go as far as to say surprising because I anticipate at this point, I've been talking about being child free for a long time, long before I had a podcast about it. And so I sometimes anticipate that I'm going to get a reaction from certain people, or if you say certain things, people have feelings about it. But I think you're right that the intention behind it, not that we have to make an excuse for people or accept things that are hard and painful to hear, which I know does happen. I think the intention oftentimes it is, of course, it's about them more than it's about us, and having that emotional detachment and leaning into curiosity and the fact that everyone does play a role on this planet. And as you said, I think it's amazing to decide to not have a baby unless it's a million percent yes. And it certainly wasn't a million percent yes to me, which is why I didn't do it. So I appreciate your approach to not just sharing these things publicly, but being prepared for what you get back when you put this stuff out into the world.
Well, trust me, there's some self-restraint on my part because there is this spicy persona that lives within me. I call her Lilith, and she has a very sassy retort to people who have had children to fix their marriage or from an identity standpoint where they need validation outside themselves. But I don't go there. I try to just look at people like they're projecting onto me what's unhealed within them, and that's okay. I don't have to interact with that. I sometimes respond, I sometimes don't. So sometimes I feel a bit of spiciness coming up within me, and I'm like, is this worth my energy?
Totally. Sometimes you just want to be like, do you think it's okay to ask me that? Or what makes you think it's okay to say that? But that's okay. We power forward for the sake of the movement. That's what I tell myself. I don't want to paint a worse picture of child free women. I want to show that we can have curious conversations. We can agree to disagree and all just feel chill about it and move forward as much as I can. Sometimes I do fly off the handle a little, but I try to keep that to a minimum.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's only fair that we leave room for our human.
Yes, I love that you have a name for your alter ego. That's amazing. Okay, so tell me more about what you see as the future of this. How can we use this? You talked about the modality of astrology and tarot. I know that you work not just with individuals, but with companies, correct?
Yes, definitely.
But tell me about how do we use this for everybody listening? What do we take away from this? How do we bring this into our lives as individuals and also within groups and organizations and communities to make positive change?
I think there's enough democratization of astrology and not just your gimmicky horoscope, but really understanding your planetary placements and what that is sharing around your soul growth. And of course, you can book a session with me, and that's going to be the deepest dive. But there's also some really credible platforms. And I know that some people have been benefited by working with the pattern or working with time passages. And those are two apps that I actually endorse. I think that they spread the wisdom really eloquently. And so, depending on your price point, depending on your level of interest, at least having a baseline framework around your own blueprint and empowering yourself around seasons and cycles would be a good starting point. I work with very open minded businesses, and they weave in modalities like a tarot and astrology session for teamwork, allowing you to have that conversation around empathy and playing into the strengths and the synergy of different teammates. So, knowing that someone might be going through a Saturn sixth house season, you can really expect that there's going to be a lot of pressure around them as a manager. How can you work to reinforce validation while also making sure that they have work life balance? If I'm working with a founder who's going through a 10th house season where their reputation might be rocked or they need to put in the work to be building up their brand persona, we can mitigate that ahead of time. So I make and work with founders and managers and teams to create business plans, to create more rapport and more synergy in collaborative environments, and not just the actual work output, but understanding someone's strengths, whether it's creativity or communication or systems or unlocking dormant talents and bringing them to the surface. I really find it to be quite exciting being on the precipice where we did have this mass adoption of astrology as a modality that people were no longer considering taboo. Having that personal inquiry that happened maybe through 2020 to 2024, but now we see it on a group level. So that's where I'm going with my practice. And you'd be surprised the companies signing up for it. I'm not going to name names or anything, but they're not your kind of woo woo. They're more, I think JP Morgan had this quote, millionaires don't work with astrologers, billionaires do. And it's encouraging to me to see the kinds of suits that come into my office, into my space, who might not be the people that you think are open-minded to these tools.
That's so cool. What kind of outcomes are people getting? What do you see happening when businesses embrace this, maybe for the first time?
Better team collaborations for sure. It's helping take away a lot of the ego and helping create more rapport and empathy across different functions within a business. And then for founders in particular, it's helpful. I think it can help them grow in terms of revenue. That's a very direct impact, especially when it comes to small businesses. You definitely see lots of growth there. But when I work with corporate clients, I think it can help a corporate team building perspective. I think the most immediate results will be interpersonal, but then you start to see, if you're weaving it within to the roadmap of your business, that there is an ROI that's very tangible in terms of monetary investment return as well.
You mentioned empathy. Do you see the ripple effect of that, the financial gains, as being a result of just people understanding people at a deeper level?
Well, efficiency for sure. And then I think there's more financial gains, for example, working with a client who we identified that there was a real PR need for her business to grow. She's going through a ninth house season. She's meant to be investing into PR as a launching pad for her own reputation era, which comes next year. And so in that way, she is spending more money and she didn't know whether to do that on traditional PR, new media, or advertising. And I was able to give my informed recommendation from an astrologer's perspective that this is the season for new media and for you to amplify your own story. This is the season to tell it versus bite-sized advertising clickbait content. I mean, there's a season for that too. It just, in this case, was not her season. And so she did make that financial investment and she saw a 5x ROI on it in the form of podcast ad spend and return from that. Again, the chart will meet you where you're at. I'm giving you the seasons and cycles and mapping that to your business plan, but then you have to do the work and you have to work with your team to identify and optimize the overarching strategy that I can support you with through reading the stars.
That's so granular and so tangible. When I think of the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, this is everything. This is massive. This is the whole universe. And then there's me as this one tiny speck within it. But what you just described, I love that you gave that example because that is so tangible. And that's an exact question that clients ask me about. Should I do meta ads? These are real things that are on people's minds.
Well, I don't think everybody is aware that business astrology exists. It gets a very into the nerdy house system and aspects. There's business blueprints. If you have the date that your LLC incorporated, we can read your business blueprint too. And both having the founder's blueprint, the business blueprint, and then reading the team, this is where we get into very granular astrology. But I think that's part of the educational barrier where people are starting to wake up that there's deeper ways to work with these modalities and to understand the model that we've been given, which is 9 to 5, go, 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 girl boss era. Let's see if that's aligned from a soul perspective. There are other ways to grow, and sometimes they are more Empress tarot aligned, which is a cyclical way of working and way of receiving support. So really is going to be individual to company to the person, but business astrology is a really exciting tool that I start to see corporate clients adopt.
You're the first person I've ever heard say business astrology. And my mind is blown that you could relate this to the formation of an LLC or the date a company started. That's crazy.
It's definitely taking off in LA. I will say, knowing that you're in the Midwest, it's a couple of years probably, but it's growing for sure.
In 2028, somebody is going to say, "Have you ever heard of business astrology?" That's when it'll be. And I'll say, "Yes. Oh my God. You need to meet Fiona. She's been doing this for years." I'm just curious, how connected do you find this to people's intuition? That PR example, or if a different example comes to mind, do you feel like you do these readings and the person is like, okay, that confirms where I was already thinking I should be going? Or is it often people being like, whoa, I hadn't even considered that. That wasn't on my mind at all. What's your experience there?
A lot of times it will map back to intuition because at the point in which I'm meeting someone, they're typically in their late 20s to mid 50s. So you lived some life and had enough planetary activations to understand some of your core blueprints. And there are transits, meaning planetary movements, that might hit you out of nowhere, where you just don't know which direction to go in. That could be Neptune bringing a lot of confusion around your business and imposter syndrome, or that could be Uranus, where there's a real unexpected outside force that's coming in and creating a lot of disruption within your business. So I would say it's half and half. Half the time, I'm giving someone a very validating reading where I can then just help them with the timing of how to execute what they already knew within. And this is where it's interesting because I'm not a fortune teller, I'm not a psychic, or some people would categorize me in that space, but I don't. I think it's actually a little bit more analytical than just channeling the future because I believe we create our future. So I can see if someone's about to go through a financially tough season, which I'm thinking about one client who's about to go through that. I don't know how that's going to happen for her. I don't know what that means in terms of how it will manifest in her life. But what I can say is it's a time to be a little bit more conservative and not to invest into risky assets and to make sure that you have a cushion of revenue for any unexpected expenses that come your way. I can give you a little bit of foresight into what the energy upcoming is going to be to one, help you double down on what's working or where there's room for opportunity, but two, mitigate any unforeseen circumstances. So, yeah, it's really half and half. And a lot of times people want support with branding, and that's where you go more into the psychology of your strengths. And other times people will want more support in forecasting their next 6 months or next 12 months. And that's where we get into more of the looking ahead with the caveat that I am not telling you a prediction. I am telling you what energy you're working with and how to work with it.
This is so fascinating to me. I could ask you a gazillion questions because, again, I'm such a beginner in this. And I feel like our connectedness to the universe around us, of course, that feels like a vast thing because the universe is so huge. But I love the way you partner with people and you do make it feel more approachable. You're not telling anybody what to do, but the way you just said that, you can tell them how to work with the energy or what energy to expect and then act accordingly.
Yeah, that's right. And then there's the manifestation of it all. I mean, especially with tarot. Tarot is very much a tool in tandem with astrology to give you a sense of what's ahead and help you make decisions properly, give advice. And I also look at those archetypes. So if you are in a season where you have the Empress coming up, this is about letting the natural unfolding of self worth attract in the opportunities and tending to self care rather than pushing forward. If you're in an Emperor moment and that's what's coming ahead for you, then it's actually a good time to be taking action and initiative against your business. And I take it a step further than just reading about these cards. And I encourage my clients to embody them, so that can be done through somatic exercises or even the way you dress. I love the idea of embodying archetypes. And that was inspired by this book that I read, Gods in Every Man. Goddesses in Every Woman by Dr. Gina M. Boland. And she's a Jungian psychologist, and she also weaves tarot into her practice and really focuses on this embodiment that can energetically bring you into that state where you're meant to thrive. I would say that I'm actually doing that for myself as I work with these tools, because a lot of my healing has been in the chakras up here. And it's always important for me to also bring it back into the body.
We seem to always go brain first, intellect first. Let me think my way through this or think my way to the next step. But the more I learn about so many different types of things in the world, the more I realize there's so many other pieces at our disposal with breath and body and somatic work and these outside pieces as well. There's so much to tap into instead of just relying on ourselves to think our way through everything that comes our way.
And for business owners and entrepreneurs, sometimes the body isn't given the right agency in the decision-making process. I'll speak from my own experience. I feel like I took on a lot in creating esoteric empowerment and also consulting with conscious communications. It's been a lot to hold. So sometimes I'll need to check in before a sprinty season to ask my body, is it wanting to have this energy output right now? Or do I need to block my calendar for a couple days and just go really deep into restorative redwoods meditations? And I know that's a luxury that I have, and maybe not everybody has, but there's also micro moments in which you can ask your body if it needs more boundaries with your scheduling or your time, or even just taking a day off of your phone on a Sunday. And to me, that's been a really important practice as I grow and expand, because it is energy work that I'm offering. So it's just reinforced this need to give my body its own space to decide what it wants to do and decide how much energy it wants to hold for other people.
That is revolutionary on its own, giving ourselves the gift of tuning into our bodies, let alone listening to our bodies and letting that dictate our schedules. We have not been conditioned to do that, right? We've been conditioned the exact opposite. Get up, make it happen, push through, drink another cup of coffee in the entrepreneurship world and really career wide. I think in most environments, it's not welcomed to be like, I'm listening to my energy right now. I cannot come in. I think most bosses are like, that's not going to fly.
I think there's more conversation around burnout culture, which I experienced severe burnout after a decade in digital media. Right at this point where I took a break during COVID and started my practice, I was so burnt out.
It is changing. I think it is. I think even you sharing it here, we need more conversations and we need to normalize that it's not necessarily this luxury. It's not laziness. It's necessary. And I do think things are starting to shift in small ways. And those of us that own businesses, we can maybe be leaders in that, in the way that we treat our own employees and operate internally. But no, I think we're learning that it's better for productivity. It's better for financial gains. It's better for morale, retention, everything when we have more of this space to look inward, find fulfillment, mind, body, and soul. So I appreciate the work that you're doing for individuals and companies to help bring this to the world.
Thank you. More conscious business.
More conscious business. Yes. And for everybody listening who is like, I need this in my life or in my business, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
So my website, esotericempowerment.com, or you can DM me. Fiona.Hillery is my Instagram with an E in the Hillary. So you can contact me directly there.
Thank you so much for coming and spending this time with us. We'll make sure all of that is linked in the show notes, and I can't wait for people to keep learning from you.
Been a true pleasure. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for listening. I would love for you to keep exploring with me. Check out the bonus episode on Substack and come hang out on Instagram for some October fun. Until next week, keep leaning into mystery, wonder, and of course, let's stay curious together.